Hi, welcome to this newest episode of Sports Talk Central. I'm your host, Adeep Mahmood, with my normal co-host, Hunter. And today we're going to be talking some NFL playoffs, some NFL head coach searches, and we'll talk a little bit about MLB Free Agency at the end of it. Just to let you know that right now we do have the Texans and Patriots game going on, and another interception by C.J. Stroud off a deflected pass by Hutchinson. So that's 3 turnovers by the Texans, and it's 14-10 Patriots right now. But what are your thoughts so far on divisional rounds?
Yeah, I mean, last night's game between Seattle and San Francisco, as you know, was awful. I know any team can beat anyone on any day, Deep, but Seattle, I think, is the best team in the NFC. The way their offense is continuing to hum with Darnold, JSN has been fantastic. Their defense has been great. Mike McDonald has that team absolutely rolling right now. So I do think pound for pound, Seattle is the best team in the NFC right now. I see them coming out of the NFC. Could be wrong. That's how I see it. The Bills-Broncos game, I feel awful for Josh Allen and Bills fans, man. They had it right there at the end. I know that call was controversial. You know what that play reminded me of? Do you remember when Devin Bush intercepted Lamar a few years ago on a very similar play when he
Yeah.
kind of like somersaulted and like he came up with the ball? That's kind of what it reminded me of. So I'm honestly not too surprised that
Also, Peyton Wilson, that Peyton
yeah,
Wilson interception this
Peyton
year.
Wilson did the same thing as well. It's funny. Two very recent examples with the Steelers kind of having the same type of play result in interception. You saw that here in the Denver game. I feel bad that the game was really decided on those two PI calls at the end. The first one was obviously, I think that was too weak. Even the second one, I'm like, you're really calling that with everything on the line. You know, by letter of the law, it was PI, but I'm also like, man, I feel bad that that's the way that the Bills are going out. Yeah, this was really, I felt like the year for the Bills in terms of you got to do it this year, D, because
No
I don't,
Lamar,
no
no
Lamar,
Mahomes,
no Burrow,
no
no Mahomes.
Burrow.
And do you think Mahomes is going to miss the playoffs too many more times during his career? I certainly don't.
It depends. I believe it depends on how many games he misses next year because
Oh,
of
yeah,
the ACL.
that's true. I mean, I think he's trying to get back for the start of the season. We'll see. But when he's healthy, they're not going to miss the playoffs too many more times. So they also have to make some changes around them. But I felt like this was the year they really needed to do it. And they didn't. Bo Nix, he's out for the rest of the season. That really stinks. I do think whoever wins this Houston game, I think is going to the Super Bowl. I think whoever wins this will go into Denver and will win next week. I'm not trying to disrespect Jarrett Stidham, but I just don't think he has what it takes to really take the Broncos to the Super Bowl with Bo Nix hurt. And then tonight, Rams-Bears is going to be quite a bit of fun as well. What are your thoughts so far?
Yeah, so I'll first talk about the Bills game.
Yeah.
So my first thoughts were, I saw this morning there was a play where it looked like one of the Broncos was being held while the Bills lineman was in the end zone. At first, I thought, okay, they won the game. Who cares? It would have been 32-30 instead of 33-30. But then I thought about it. Bo Nix got hurt the second to last play of the game. So technically, the game should have been over because apparently that should have been a safety. So it sucks because the result would have been the same, but now the AFC Championship game, because of that call, is significantly changed because now we have if you call that a safety, you have Bo Nix playing in that game, and like you just said, no one has confidence in Jarrett Stidham. So that look, I like Josh Allen as a football player. What he has earned to be one of the big four in that AFC.
Oh, yeah.
100%. And the problem with Josh, and I think there's a lot of Ravens fans out there, and look, off field, I have heard apparently what we've seen, you haven't seen anything bad about the guy. So this whole thing, and let me say this. I have nothing against Josh Allen. I have an issue with sometimes the media kind of glazes him a little too much. Like you have some people from ESPN that you probably know who I'm talking about will say it's about the coaches, it's about the team around him, it's not Josh Allen's fault. But then certain other quarterbacks, it's the standard is on them. I would like it to be more of a fair standard. And look, yeah, Josh Allen's what 7-8, something like that in postseason. So I do think we have to have that discussion. Like we can have that discussion with nuance about Josh Allen being a quarter, like being where does he rank in that Burrow, Lamar, Mahomes area. But again, I think it's. But then also, I know people are so sick and tired of the whole glazing aspect with Josh Allen. I don't know if you saw it on your Twitter, like all the Josh Allen jokes and all that stuff. I think that there is a way we could be in the middle of we can say, hey, Josh Allen's good. He takes his team to playoffs almost every year. But sometimes he doesn't. But it's also on him that the reason why the Bills have not made it that far. And like you said, this was the year for Josh Allen to actually show to take that step ahead of Lamar. And the problem with Josh, and now we'll talk. We can talk a little bit in more about this in the head coaching search. I don't think they're going to let go of Sean McDermott, but you got to imagine if this happens next year, we got to have discussions. We got to have those discussions about that. Other game that was an ass whooping. Robert Saleh, I know that he's a head coaching candidate for several places. Not his best showing. I know that he didn't have Fred Warner. I know that I think after the second half, he didn't have his Tonga, their backup tight end. But that was not a good showing. I'm generally curious about this. 5 years. Let's say 5 years. If this is where the 49ers are, they do not win a Super Bowl within the next 5 years. What's Shanahan's job security looking like?
I still think you can make an argument that he could be coach of the year this year based on what he did with so many injuries, especially on defense. I know Robert Saleh, wasn't his best showing at deep, but they were signing dudes off the street and plugging them in there. And for a bunch of the season, it felt like they weren't missing the beat. That they were just so banged up at so many positions. I thought Kyle Shanahan did a great job this year. I don't see him getting fired anytime soon. I think if they can add another playmaker or two on offense and get the defense healthy, I think they can definitely take another run at this next year. I still really like this 49ers roster. I think they're going to move on from Brandon Ayuk and figure out that situation over the offseason, but I still really like this team, and I think it's a testament to how good of a coach Kyle Shanahan still is. Going back to Allen, I understand what you're saying. He's very much in the top 4, though, of this.
Yeah.
Like, you can argue, obviously I have Mahomes at the top. You can interchange anywhere you want. It does stink that he's been coming up short on these final drives a few postseasons in a row. So I do think he can catch a little bit of flack for that. But also at the same time, Adit, they need to actually get him some weapons on the offensive side of the ball outside of Cook, the main running back. His wide receiver situation there is flat out awful. And yeah, I know Lamar's situation with wide receivers is also not very good. But they got to get a proven playmaker for Josh Allen to throw the ball to. Like, it's gotten really bad there. So I do think that's priority number 1 for the Bills. I also hear you. If they fall up short again next year, I'll throw this out there. Maybe this is a tinfoil hat theory. Say they fire McDermott next year, for example, if they come up short. Mike Tomlin might be available. I'm just saying, like, he's not coaching this year. And I think the Bills would potentially really consider talking to him if that happened. Again, that's so far in the future. Who knows if that's even going to happen? I just had to float it out there.
Just for the memes, we don't know what the Eagles situation is. We don't know what the Commanders situation is. Kind of want to see Tomlin, if he chooses to coach after the season, because that's not confirmed, go to the Eagles or go to the Commanders. Because we had 18 years of Harbaugh and Tomlin in the same division. If he goes to the Eagles or if he goes to the Commanders, you're going to get Harbaugh versus Tomlin in the NFC East. And I just want to see that reaction. And by the way, and also Harbaugh and Tomlin would be the 2 best coaches in that division if Tomlin were to go to the Eagles. if Tomlin were to go to the Commanders.
I don't
But
see them firing that, like the Eagles, for example. Like that's,
yeah,
I saw cries for Nick Sirianni to be fired. Eagles fans are out of their minds. He just won a Super Bowl last year, man. Like what are we doing?
No, it's going to what's going to happen is his job security is going to be red hot. Then they're going to win, and they're going to get very far, and he's just going to do enough to buy himself a couple more years, and then the job security is going to go. It's going to simmer down a little bit, then come back up, and he's going to do something really well, and then he's going to keep his job. He's going to keep doing something to keep his job. But no, I just wanted to just bring up that just for the memes of Harbaugh and Tomlin in the same exact division once again. But yeah, well, and also look, the Texans offense is crapping the bed right now.
I mean, CJ Stroud was awful last week. The only reason the Steelers didn't win that game is because they were running a high school offense, man. Like a competent offense last week, Adit beats that Texans team. Let's be real here.
Yeah, and obviously, I think the Rams could beat the Bears. I mean, and again, it's partly because the Packers blew a 21-6 lead. I don't know if the Rams would do the same thing. So I think Rams take down. I think Rams will take down the Bears. I understand it's cold, and I know you got those guys. I know that Stafford and it's probably closer to be playing in warmer weather, but I think we see Rams Seahawks in the championship game next week.
So you're taking the Rams tonight?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna go with the Bears. Something about them feels very,
They got the Pope. They got the Pope going for them.
They got that, and they also the comeback Bears, man, the cardiac Bears. That's what I'm gonna keep calling them. I think they're going to win tonight. I think we're going to get Bears, Seahawks, and I think Seattle's going to go to the Super Bowl. But let's get into some coaches. So we got John Harbaugh to the Giants. No surprise there that had been done, it felt like, for a couple of days. Kevin Stefanski to the Falcons. I think that's a good move for the Falcons, getting an experienced, established offensive coach in there to really help Michael Penix Jr. So that's what we have so far.
Callahan.
Go ahead.
And apparently, what sounds like it's gonna be Callahan, the old lineman coach.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like he's gonna be going to Atlanta, and it might be that Elbridge, the defense coordinator for the Falcons, will remain there. So
okay, yeah, I did hear about that report. I did want to ask you, with those two openings, were you surprised at the Harbaugh decision at all after the year?
A little bit, and I think a little bit because it did kind of feel like it's tough because with Harbaugh he had that 3-year extension, and one of the reasons I think that he got $20 million a year from the Giants was because he had to at least make at least enough money per year so that the Ravens don't actually have to pay him pay the remainder of that salary. So that's the first thing. It's so tough with Harbaugh because, and I think you can agree with this, we are getting to the point where it's like you can probably count on one hand how many years he has left. And it would have to have been something like winning a Super Bowl to really extend it.
Right.
So you're kind of in that weird positioning of, all right, we're really, that idea of moving on from Harbaugh is becoming more visible. And it's just a matter of time. When do you make that move? And you know what? Seeing some of the candidates, like we can talk Ravens and Steelers, their head coach search, and then expand onto other ones. Seeing like Chris Shula, Shellhouse, Minter, seeing all these guys, it did kind of feel like the right time because you have that right mix of candidates that could replace them. But it's also like, Hunter, how often do you see this where a team lets go of their head coach, but yet the head coach is the top candidate out of all the best? You can make an argument on paper he is the best available candidate, and the team that lets go of that coach is also the best available spot. Right? It's very rare. You might get one or the other, but with the Ravens, I think that's fine. I think that works, and I think the timing of it, all of that kind of worked itself in a way that, yeah, I think it was time. I'm not going to do the revisionist history nonsense that some of these fans do, where it's like Harbaugh had inherited a really great situation and he didn't build the Ravens culture and all this other stuff. I choose to be happy for the fact that for 18 years we had a really good head coach who set the floor up to a point where I didn't have to worry about losing season unless a lot of people were injured. And I know he only won one Super Bowl, and ultimately in the last few years only got to one AFC Championship game. I get it. The Steelers are an interesting case because I think they were also in that same situation of Mike Tomlin's younger than Harbaugh, I believe, by like 7 or 8 years. But I think they were also probably in that situation of, okay, Mike Tomlin, we're probably closer to the end of Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh. It's like, when do we get to that point where it's like year to year? Was that the sense on your end?
They were prepared to run it back with him. That's what Art Rooney said during his presser, though he also did say he wasn't shocked that Tomlin came to this decision because it was his call. He stepped down. He wanted to go spend more time with his family. You saw the pictures that have popped up over social media, Adit, down at college over the weekend. So he's just doing his thing with his family, and there were teams that reached out asking, hey, would you be down to interview? And he turned them down. He's not going to coach this year. I think at the earliest he'll coach is 2027. Though if he decides to, the Steelers will have to have a conversation about compensation because you saw with Sean Payton, the Saints got back some draft compensation. The Steelers will definitely get back some draft compensation if a team wants to hire Mike Tomlin next year. Though I also do think there is a distinct possibility that he does not coach again like Bill Cowher did. Because, when Cowher got into TV, there were still some people that were like, well, maybe Cowher does come back and all that stuff. But as time went on, you could see that he was enjoying himself, and he obviously didn't go back into coaching after leaving the Steelers. So we'll see what the future holds with Mike Tomlin. I think he was just drained. I think that's also a really big thing. And it was time. It was, no playoff wins and 9 straight seasons. That's unacceptable here, especially for a team that prides itself on not just winning playoff games, but usually winning Super Bowls. So I know it's been a while since I last won one.
Yeah, it was so bad that Bryce Harper was still a couple of years away from. I believe Bryce Harper was a couple of years away from free agency when the last time you guys won a playoff game.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't won a playoff game since basically the Obama administration. Like it's literally been that long. So, and they keep just getting blown out in a lot of these games, and that's not the standard here in Pittsburgh. So, I have a ton of respect for him. He brought the 6th Lombardi, been to 2 Super Bowls, been to numerous AFC Championship games, 19 straight seasons without a losing season. Excuse me. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Anyone who tries to argue otherwise, I think, is just a moron that's looking for clicks. He is going to Canton one day, and it's going to be very deserved. But at the same time, it was time for a change, man. It really, really, really was. And so far, indeed, it sounds like based on some of the reporting, they have done 6 virtual interviews. Nate Shieldhouse, Chris Shula, who I think Chris Shula is potentially going to get this job. I think he's a very serious candidate. Anthony Weaver has gotten one, Jesse Minter, Jeff Halfley, and Brian Flores. They're also expected to speak to Mike McCarthy, though I think that's more of a courtesy interview since he's from the area and you can bounce ideas off of him. Ejiro Evero, I believe, is also expected to get an interview this week. And I think they're going to add a couple more candidates to the mix, though. There is one second interview planned this week.
I believe Clay Kubiak is one of the guys.
Clay Kubiak, yes, he is also getting an interview. I believe that's today, based on some of the reporting I saw. The second interview, and it looks like he's going to be at least a finalist, is Brian Flores. And I understand why. He's a very good defensive coordinator. He's worked under Mike Tomlin. They are very familiar with him. So you add all those things up, it makes sense. But my biggest thing is, Adit, his Miami tenure ended really messy. So he's not at the top of my list for candidates. I would have Chris Shula up there, Nate Shieldhouse, and also, imagine he gets the job, Nate Shieldhouse for all the Yinzers. That would be hilarious. Again, I think Brian Flores, great DC. You've seen his work with Minnesota. I'm just a bit skeptical of him as a head coach based on what happened in Miami. And I know, the Dolphins owner is, a nutcase. That organization is also, very strange. but I would just have some concerns about him overall as a head coach when I don't for some of these other candidates. But hey, maybe if he gets the job and does very well, I'll be here looking like a complete idiot. But it looks like he is at least going to be a finalist, though I do think they're going to take their time with this as well. If I had to make a prediction, though, I'm still going to say Chris Shula. They seem to really like him quite a bit. He kind of fits that Mike Tomlin mold of, again, a young, established defensive name.
Under 40.
And be here for a while. And also bring in, hopefully, a competent offensive coaching staff. That's something that Mike Tomlin really didn't do a lot during his tenure. And that's something that I want the new head coach to change, whoever it is. But I don't think they're going to hire a young offensive guy for head coach. I still think it's going to be a young defensive guy. At least that's me.
Yeah, and I think all the Ravens, I mean, right now they've interviewed, and this is a long list, so pay attention to the names. Apparently, you're going to interview Joe Brady, Robert Saleh, Chris Shula, Shieldhouse, Anthony Weaver, Vance Joseph, Davis Webb. Was it Clint Kubiak is one that they're interviewing. Jesse Minter is one that they're interviewing. They interviewed Brian Flores, Matt Nagy. I don't think that's not going to happen. But again, I think they've interviewed 16 players, 16 coaches. If I had to guess, the five that they will we can say that they'll bring in for second interviews. Jesse Minter, Clint Kubiak, Robert Saleh, Mike McDaniels, and I'll say Chris Shula. Either Chris Shula or Davis Webb.
If of those five, Adi, who do you think gets the job? If you had to guess.
I'm going to say Minter. I think that the familiarity with the Ravens, I think Steve Bisciotti may have fired Harbaugh over the phone, but he also did go to Harbaugh a couple days later and said, I really hated that I had to do that. To me, that suggests he still respects Harbaugh. He still likes him. It's just that it was time, and maybe he didn't. I think that, look at the success that Mike Macdonald is having. And Jesse Minter and Mike Macdonald were on the same staff. So I just have a feeling that the familiarity is going to go towards Minter. Robert Saleh, I don't know. Because I would say Robert Saleh would be up there, but the only issue is I'm only interested in him if you can bring in Mike McDaniels to be the OC. But the problem is, if Mike McDaniels does what we think he can do with Lamar, I think it's about 2 years before he gets a head coaching opportunity.
Yeah, I think he's going
to that whole. Yeah, and then you get into that whole cycle. And do I trust Robert Saleh to make 2, 3 good offensive coordinator hires? No idea. Chris Shula is super interesting because he's kind of just in the Jesse Minter mold, but he's also kind of further away from the Ravens. And he's got the last name, and obviously he's got the coaching bloodlines. That's going to help.
Grandson of Don Shula. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and he comes from the McVay tree, so that he can bring in Shieldhouse. He can bring in a few other guys to be the OC. So
that's what I want the Steelers to kind of do. Yeah. If they go the direction of Shula, I want them to bring in Shieldhouse to be the OC. I think that would be a really nice combination.
Yeah, and then the cycle of coordinators. I'm not as worried. I'm not as worried at that point because that is a good lineage to go with the Shanahan McVay tree. But yeah, I think that's kind of how I think it's going to work. I know a lot of Ravens fans want Brian Flores. I don't think he's getting another interview. I think that it's just he's just getting this one interview here, and then it's going to be someone else. He's not going to be a finalist.
He's at least a finalist here because he's getting a second interview this week. Again, I'm not surprised because the organization is familiar with him. He worked here under Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin really likes him. So I'm not surprised that they're bringing him in for a second interview, though. I don't expect any rash decisions. Like Art Rooney said last week, this is going to take a few weeks. I don't think personally they're going to just have him in here and then offer him the job. I think they're going to want to talk to more people for second interviews once those start. And for example, I think Chris Shula is going to come in for a second interview.
Yeah.
If the Rams lose tonight, for example, I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow you see a tweet from Schefter, oh, the Steelers are bringing him in for an in-person interview. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to be making a decision for a while.
Yeah, and if we go to the other teams now, the Miami Dolphins, I think, might be the next team. And apparently right now they're looking at it sounds like Jeff Hafley is going to be the favorite for it. I don't remember his Boston tenure as a head coach at Boston College working out that great. But makes sense. They went out and got the guy from Green Bay to be their GM. Obviously, Hafley went to was an assistant coach, and makes perfect sense that they are going to do that. Just kind of feels like a weird hire, but look, at the end of the day, the problem with Miami is Tua has like $90 million in dead cap, and you got to work with that, and Miami is in such deep trouble in terms of the roster. Maybe it is good that they are going with a defensive-minded guy. But what are your thoughts on Hafley being the favorite for that job?
Not surprised, especially for what you just said. Again, and I've read that too. The GM now in Miami has worked with Jeff Hafley. He's familiar with him. I know other teams are really trying to line up Hafley for second interviews. Don't be shocked if he doesn't even get there. Like, I think Miami might offer Hafley the job as soon as Monday if they like how he does with a second interview. So I think he is definitely the favorite there. Arizona feels like they're up in the air. Tennessee has interviewed like 20 plus people. Have you seen that, by the way? They've interviewed a lot of people there. The Raiders, I'm still not sure what they're going to do for theirs. I touched on the Steelers and the Ravens. I still think the Steelers and the Ravens are the top two jobs available, and I think for obvious reasons. I think the Steelers and Ravens are going to be the last two teams to fill their coaching vacancies. I think they're both going to take their time. The organizations kind of mirror each other, Adi, with how they run things. Yeah, so I think they're both going to really take their time with their searches. The Ravens, obviously, I think the Steelers are going to do the same thing as well. It's the owner and the GM are both doing the interviews. Am I missing any of the other teams?
No, I think Titans. I think apparently Nagy might be one of the favorites for that.
I did see that.
I feel awful for Cam Ward if that's the case. I don't know why he's getting these head coaching opportunities. Raiders, I think I feel like it's Clint Kubiak. I feel like they're waiting for Clint Kubiak, and that might be a smart move. Because
I can see him getting a job this cycle too. Go on.
Yeah, no, because the number one overall pick, like you give Clint Kubiak Mendoza and the ability to shape the offense around him, I think that's a good match. And you pair that with like a good defensive coordinator, I think that could be right time, right place.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah.
Also, it is, just clarifying for the Steelers, Mike McCarthy and Brian Flores are meeting in person this week. Virtual interviews per Jerry Dulac are not needed because the team is already familiar with each. So obviously they haven't done a virtual interview with McCarthy, but I'm not sure if Jerry is saying that they've done a virtual interview with Flores or not.
I believe they have.
Weird. I think so. If that's true, Flores is the first person for a second interview. If not, then this is still his first interview. But we'll see. They're still not really close to this being done. But yeah, I do think the next domino to fall, though, is going to be Miami with Jeff Hafley. After that, Cleveland. Grant Udinski of Jacksonville is getting a second interview, which I think that's a good move. I think he's going to be a head coach someday. Jeff, their DC,
Schwartz.
Why am I Schwartz? Yeah, Jim Schwartz, not Jeff Schwartz. Jim Schwartz is also getting a second interview there. So I'm also curious to see what Cleveland does too. Yeah,
and Todd Monken is also getting the second interview there as well. So I think and then I think Minter's also getting one. Shellhouse is getting another interview there. I think it's going to be Schwartz. Like, I think it wouldn't surprise me that the first domino to fall is Hafley to Miami and then Schwartz to Cleveland. And I think it just goes to show how much of a cluster F Arizona and Tennessee are, with the fact that we don't know which we can't picture someone going to those teams, like much like how we can say Minter to Baltimore, Shula to Pittsburgh, Kubiak to Raiders. I mean, I hope for your sake the Steelers don't go with McCarthy, because that kind of just would feel like you're
I
trying to get Rodgers.
I don't think they will. I think it's more of a courtesy interview, and you can also bounce ideas off of him. Remember, Adi, he's from Pittsburgh. Like, this was
Yep.
his team growing up. So, I mean, they're going to give him a legit interview, but I also think at the same time, they'll never admit this. But I think it's more of a courtesy. Hey, you've done a lot of good work in the NFL. You're from here. Let's pick your brain a little bit. I would be very surprised if he was the hire. It goes against everything the Steelers have done with head coaching hires since Chuck Noll. So I'd be a bit surprised.
Yeah, like I said, I think it sounds like the last three Pittsburgh coaches were Shula. No, the last were under 40 and defense coordinators.
Yes.
So someone like Chris Shula, I definitely think that fits their mold. You go and get a legacy guy, especially someone with that last name. I just feel like the Rooney family is so focused. Like the idea of NFL history and lineage is so valuable to them. It's really interesting to them, to the point where I do think that could be where they go. And again, like, that coaching tree is there. We'll end the show with MLB talk. Free agency was kind of heating up a little bit last few days. We had Bregman get a massive deal with the Cubs. We had Kyle Tucker get a massive deal. Get a deal with the Dodgers. We had a few other. I think we had Ranger Suarez go to Boston. We had Bo Bichette go to the Mets, and we had Realmuto go to the Phillies. We'll save the Tucker to Dodgers conversation a little for the last one. Again, I think I want to talk the Bregman and Ranger Suarez thing. I think it goes to show how quickly teams can pivot, because the Red Sox were trying to get Bregman. They had a 5-year, $165 million offer, and then the Cubs came in with 5 years, 175, and the Red Sox thought they had him, and then a day later they agreed on a deal with Ranger Suarez for 130. The Orioles were in on Ranger. They had a very similar offer. My understanding is that they probably weren't going to go the 7 years. Now, the only question is the way they operate. Like, I think since the last time we recorded, the Orioles went out and they gave Pete Alonso $155 million. So clearly they are not the same old Orioles. They are trying to spend money. The challenge, and I think so. I do think that if they were given a chance to counter, they would have, which does make me think that they're moving on to someone else, whether it's Framber, whether it's Gallen, whether it's a trade. They're thinking of another move. What that move is, no idea. There was a report saying that the Orioles were going after Verlander. I think Verlander is a plan C or D. Like, if they can't get Gallen or they can't get Framber, I wouldn't be surprised if Verlander was pretty high up on their list at that point. But I think that's the first thing. The teams pivot. The Bo Bichette, Hunter, I don't know if you saw this, but apparently the Phillies thought they agreed on like a 7-year, $200 million deal, and then the Mets came in at 3 years, 126, which really was two opt-outs, $142 million deal times 3. So, good move by them. I mean, the Mets lost a ton of players, but then you go get Simeon, you go get Bichette, who's probably going to be playing third base. You go get Polanco. They still need a pitcher. They need to figure out their pitching situation. Realmuto, and again, going back to quickly countering or quickly pivoting, Phillies go out and get Realmuto, 3 years, $45 million. Then we'll talk about the Kyle Tucker contract after. But what are your thoughts on these bigger moves?
Yeah, not really too surprising. I still think the Phillies need to do a bit more. A lot of Phillies fans are really not happy with the offseason that they're having, especially since they keep coming up short. So I still think the Phillies need to be a bit more aggressive, in my opinion. Again, not really too surprised with the other moves as well. This is the type of offseason where it's so slow because news trickles in like every other week, like players are just really weighing their options or trying to make the best decision. But it just makes for a very boring offseason because just not much happens. I remember when the MLB offseason used to be a lot more fun, but not really too surprised with the Bo Bichette news, the Ranger Suarez news. Nothing really surprised me with those. As for Kyle Tucker, again, the Dodgers continue to be the evil empire here, just stacking more Infinity Stones to their already very stacked team, Adid. And if some people doubted that there was going to be a lockout, I don't think those people are doubting anymore, because after this season, especially now with this contract, I think there's going to be a lockout for a whole year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of hurt feelings and tough discussions. But I don't know if it's going to be a full season. I know it's definitely going to be pushing it to the limit. At the very least, it's going to be pushing it to the limit. I mean, going back to with Kyle Tucker, Mets offered 220 over 4 years, so that's $55 million. Blue Jays offered 350 over 10, and that was the big rumor. I know that was the big rumor. The Blue Jays were the favorites.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been really curious on. I'm really curious on why the Blue Jays, when you saw that the Mets offered 220 over 4, why didn't you offer 4 or 5 or 6, like 5 for 250, 6 for 300? Like, why not try to get closer to the 4 years? Now maybe it's a giant middle finger to that they would feel towards the Blue Jays if you had a 10-year offer. Now you cut that offer in half, but I think for the Blue Jays that would have been, if the other teams are offering those contracts with significantly higher annual value, I at least would have considered you got 2 offers, 10 years 350 or 5 for 280, 290. I believe the Blue Jays do have a lot of money that's going to be coming off the books, so they can't pay it. So I would have done that if I was the Blue Jays. But yeah, and then the Dodgers, yeah, $60 million a year is ridiculous. I like Kyle Tucker. He is not worth $60 million a year. He's not. He's a good player. I'm stretching to think of a reason to give him $50 million a year.
Yeah, it's a lot, but when you've won 2 World Series, it feels like they can really just do whatever they want, and they have the money they have too. So it's going to make for a pretty interesting discussion about this whole situation with a salary cap, other owners not spending money, all that good stuff. It's been pretty quiet, I will say, for the Nats too. They just signed Trevor Gott though a couple days ago, but they're still having trade discussions. I still think they're going to make another move or two before spring training. It's just so dead right now that really nothing is getting done, even from someone like Mackenzie Gore, for example, who's been in trade rumors a lot.
Yeah, and I think the Orioles definitely were very active early. I mean, you started off trading for Andrew Kittredge, and you go and trade for Taylor Ward, and then you go out and get Pete Alonso, and then you go out and get Shane Baz, and then you go out and get Zach Eflin, and you get Ryan Helsley. I mean, they've done a lot, which is good. I would like to see them go out and get another starter. Look, and I know I said I'm not the biggest fan of them going after Verlander, but if you were to give me the situation of they go out, they're not going to get Gallen, they're not going to get Framber, but they'll get Verlander, but they go out and get Cody Bellinger to kind of fortify that lineup, and now you add Taylor Ward and his 36 home runs, Pete Alonso and what he's done, Cody Bellinger and what he can do to that lineup, and now you add Baz, Eflin, and Verlander, who, by the way, 3.85 ERA last year at 42 years old. He's throwing 95, on average. Whatever he's doing, he's nailing it. I would be okay with a Verlander if you can go out and get Bellinger, but I would prefer Gallen or Framber. If you can get Gallen and you go into next year and it's Bradish, Rogers, Gallen, Baz, Kramer, and Eflin, that's a good rotation at least to start the year. And that's a better spot to where you were. This is about a salary cap, salary floor idea that I brought up. I want to get your quick thoughts on this. What if, okay, so if someone came to you and said, what we will do every year is we'll take the average salary, and you can include deferrals in some way or whatever, without deferrals. Average salary of each position to create an average overall number. And then you add half of whatever that value is to the average, and that's your salary cap. So if it's 100, it's 150 is your salary cap, hypothetically. And if you if you divide it by 2, you get to salary floor. So the idea would be, as the average salary goes up per position, that overall average value would go up. That means your floor would go up, and that means your salary cap would go up as well. Because I think the problem that I think people have is, we need a salary cap, we need a salary floor, but baseball salaries now is not going to be baseball salaries 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or 15 years from now. You need that floor and cap idea to be done in such a way that is reflective of the spending habits, while also forcing some of these other teams, like the Brewers. Freddie Peralta's really good. He's making only $8 million this year. That's a steal. Apparently, he's on the trade market. Freddie Peralta should not be on the trade market. Tarik Skubal, one of the best pitcher in the game right now. He wanted $32 million for this season. You would say that's a fair amount. You would say, if Tarik Skubal comes to you and says, I want $32 million, you're probably saying, oh, thank God he doesn't want 40. Thank God he doesn't want 45 or 50 million a year. 32 million? Cool, I'll pay. And then you have the Tigers saying, no, we think you're worth 19. Chris Bassett, who's a number 5 starter, his last contract was 3 years, $63 million. Chris Bassett is making more than 19 million a year. Show Tarik Skubal respect. At least offer him 26, 27 million a year. But I do want to get your opinion on that idea of essentially taking the average annual non-deferred money per position, and then using some scale to create a moving salary cap, salary floor.
Yeah, it's at least a start. Like, you have to start somewhere, just because I think the status quo is just not acceptable. And you're seeing why, like, again, with just everything that's going on with the Dodgers, and, with the luxury tax, and again, other teams, owners not really spending either. This is at least a start, but the real trick is, you're going to have to try to get every owner on board with something like that, like during a lockout, for example. And are they going to be able to beat out the players? That's going to be the real question.
No. Yeah, you got to get the players to want to be on the team.
It's at least a start, but they got to figure out something that's fair for everyone, because the status quo right now is just like, there's a reason why you keep seeing tweets like, man, I'm not even looking forward to this season. It's just going to be the same old thing. Why do I even watch this sport? Like, you don't want to keep seeing tweets like that for one of the top sports in this country. If you can't keep the status quo. Like, something's going to have to change with this. So you got to start somewhere. That's really where I'll put it.
What about this? And then we'll end the show on this note. The Dodgers, they have the benefit of being in California, having the Japanese market, being in the biggest market as you can, and they do everything right. Let's also be honest, they draft and develop really well.
They do.
Now,
yes.
What are your thoughts on a potential, when it comes to the deferred money, no team can have more, like, out of all the deferred money from this point on, right? So any contract, like Ohtani's contract, that doesn't count here. Any contract from, let's say, a new CBA onwards, no team can have more than like 20% of the deferred money, because again, you can keep that stuff recorded. So in other words, the Dodgers can't have like 30, like, out of the money that's deferred from any contract from the new CBA on, the Dodgers can't have like 30. It can't be the Dodgers that have like 30%. That way, the Dodgers, if you do a salary cap, salary floor, and you can kind of limit the deferred money, the Dodgers would have to pick and choose where they go. And the other thing would be this. If the Dodgers want another big name player, they're going to have to shed some of these big contracts. So then that's going to allow for certain teams like the Kansas City Royals, who could use a Blake Snell, who could use a Tyler Glasnow, right? Some of these teams that won't spend money, they can go and actually trade for these bigger contracts, guys with bigger contracts from teams like the Dodgers, so they could inflate their payrolls up and get someone of value. And that way, yes, it will suck because the Dodgers and some of these big market teams are still going to get these bigger name players. But again, let's also be honest. Most of these big name players are going to go there. But right. So the idea would be every few years, it's almost like in the Premier League, you have like a loan system.
Yes.
So it's kind of like that, but it's a way to balance out the scales. And then hopefully you hope that these smaller market teams can fill in the margins to be more competitive. Like, what are your thoughts on something like that?
There's the potentially. That was weird. There's potential for it. I think if you can, find the right type of agreement. I'm not the most knowledgeable in this area. No. I have to do more research, of course, with it. But again, the status quo is just not gonna get it done. So, you gotta start somewhere at least.
Yep, and I think we'll end the show on that note. Right now, the Patriots are up 21-10 in halftime. Second half it's going to be starting soon. Hopefully, the game's close. But yeah, next show we'll talk. We'll talk about the AFC and NFC championship games as well. I think Indiana will win. I think Indiana will beat Miami.
Same.
Tomorrow. But yeah, so I think, and also we will recap that game as well. And if there is some new coaching information or new positions that are solidified, we'll talk about those as well.
Yeah, that's perfect.